When you see people, first of all, they're operating with smiles on their faces, right? So they're doing their job, but it's the fact that they're getting things done all the way through from start to finish. They're not checking in with you. They're not asking how, they're not asking if they could do this because they have the confidence that they're doing it right. And they know that you as their leader empowered them to go ahead and do it. I mean, that's the biggest part. Like, you don't want to be a flyover. I'm over the top of you. Don't do this. It's like, oh, we're going to do this on this date and you're done already. And it went excellent because you have been unleashed. I haven't sat there and said, hey, check in with me. No, they're getting stuff done. I had one person who launched something today. She mentioned to me, and I was like, oh, dude, remember she told me that. But I meant that it went really well for her start to finish and she got it done.
Welcome to the Unleashing Leaders podcast, where we work with willing leaders to accelerate the changes you seek. We'll learn from the experiences of different leaders facing real challenges and distill practical, purposeful steps to apply in your context. I'm Lee Scott, your curious co-pilot. Together, let's make positive changes for our companies and communities. Welcome back to the Unleashing Leaders podcast. Today, we are joined by a fantastic guest with a fantastic topic that many of us have dealt with in our lives. His name is Charles Sharp. He is the Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer for Pride Industries, headquartered out of Roseville, but with a nationwide presence. And today we're going to be talking about leading in high-level positions at a young age, overcoming doubts from others and yourself. Charles is also a recent client of Unleashing Leaders. We've been able to do business together. He's a great guy, leader in his community. Charles, we've been talking about doing this for years, man, but it's so nice to have you finally on the show.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Lee, for taking off some time and making sure we were able to connect. I'm looking forward to it today. Awesome.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. We always have a good time. Well, Charles, before we jump into your origin story, could you tell us a little bit about your business, Pride Industries, and what they do? It's such a fabulous mission-driven organization.
Yeah, so thanks. I work for Pride Industries of Roseville, California. We are the nation's leading employer of people with disabilities. So we employ people with disabilities throughout the country. We have about 4,000 employees, and to date, about half of those employees have disabilities. And on our federal contracts, we have Ability One contracts. So on those contracts, 75% of the people on those contracts have disabilities. So we're actually up to 77% right now. So they're making a big difference employing people with disabilities.
That is great. And it crosses so many industries. I mean, I knew of Pride, living in that area for a little while and then getting some behind the scenes tours back in the 90s. But you guys cross so many industries. Like you said, you got federal maintenance contracts. You guys have manufacturing. You got packaging. You got design. It is a remarking breadth of services that you provide. Could you give us a little bit about what some of those are?
Yeah, so we have total facilities maintenance. So think about any office building that you're in an office building, anything that's done in an office building from custodial, electrical, heating, cooling, HVAC, construction, repairs, any of that type of work. Pride Industries does that work. And if you were outside the building, landscaping, roads and grounds, which could lead to, filling potholes or any type of things that are done outside the building, we do that as well. And then also we have manufacturing, logistics as well. So and on that side, we do a lot of work with some customers. I'll use HP, for example. We process all of the HP returns in North America right there and up the road from our office in Roseville. And we worked there for about almost 25, 30 years now. And so we got
I think my cousin used to work there. He's since passed away, but that's where he worked when he worked for Pride back in the day.
Awesome. When I started, that was one of the things I did. I wanted to go to some of the local jobs that we were working so I can see for myself, what it really looks like and see people in action. So I got a chance to go over there, and that's probably a big place. I mean, some of these locations we're talking about are fairly, sizable. And the one I'm talking about, that was probably 300,000 square feet. If I go to the federal side, we have some exciting places to work, places I've been where I was like, I would never end up going there. The Bureau of Engraving and Printing in Fort Worth, Texas. That's where you print the $100 bills. So that one, being a CFO, that was big for me to go there.
That was like going to Mecca. Yeah, for sure.
Listen, you're talking about seeing pallets of money. I've seen billions of dollars in cash. And at that location, we handle all the HVAC, heating, cooling, mechanical work. And we're talking about people with disabilities working there. It's a 1 million square foot building and responsible for keeping that temperature exactly how it needs to be for that facility.
For all the setting to happen. But I just love it because, we talk about any business, every employee, every member of your team
they bring some strengths and they have some liabilities, right? They have some blind spots, they have some weaknesses, whatever. And that's not a bad thing. That's just describing the beautiful range of humanity. But you guys really make a point of saying, hey, everybody brings something to the table. It's a matter of finding out what that is and then really matching them, to a role or a job where they're able to contribute. And I mean, I've seen it firsthand. I've been inside your guys' organization. I've worked with your leaders. When you see somebody who their entire life was told they're no good, they're useless, right? And you're like, no, there is something that you can do and you can make a difference and contribute. Man, the sense of pride, I know it's an acronym, but the sense of pride just goes up. The sense of, hey, I am contributing to society. I'm part of a team. I've got other people that I can connect to. I mean, the benefits go well beyond the immediate client impact and even that individual. It really ripples throughout a community. So it's been an honor to work with you guys for it's been what 3.5 years or so now. I
Yeah,
think we've
about
been
3 years.
together.
About 3 years. Yep. 3 years. Yep.
So really, I love the business, love the mission. But today we're here to talk about Charles, who's even more cool than the organization. So roll back the clock for me here. Like, tell us a little bit about your early career, and when you first started recognizing that, hey, okay, you have a talent for leadership. You got a talent, and you find yourself in these positions, but you're, buck 50, 25 years old, whatever, right? Like everybody's looking at you like, what? You can't be in this job.
I mean, Lee, that's a great segue. When I think back to some of my early jobs, right? I worked in healthcare before coming to Pride Industry. So I was in healthcare for majority of my career before coming over. And I remember one job I ended up working my way up from. I started out as like a marketing financial coordinator, just, working on sales incentive compensation type work, work closely with VP of sales, chief marketing officer, those guys taught me a ton about, relationships and about how to communicate with people. And one of the things they told me was about every interaction I had back then was an opportunity. So don't take it lightly when you're talking to somebody, right? When you get to meet people. And I always tell this one story. My first day of work there, I went into the conference room and they were starting our sales. It was a sales team that was starting. This is, I think they were going to be New York sales. And that group started the same day I started. And I remember they're getting the room set up and the screens were up and, you're looking at what's going to be on the screen. And the guy was trying to get it in order. And one of the new salespeople says, hey, AV guy, called him AV guy. Hey, AV guy, it's still a little blurry. I need you to fix that. So the guy says, hey, no problem. I'll fix it before he gets it in order. He leaves the room. It goes on, we're meeting. And about an hour and a half later, the same guy comes back in. He's standing in the back of the room. And the person up front says, hey, I want to introduce you to the president and CEO. So the guy who he thought was the AV guy was actually the president and CEO. And look, and he comes he comes in and he says, he goes to his whole speech, tells about the company. He says, here's how you make sure you treat people really good. Because you never know when the AV guy is going to be the president. So that stuck with me. And
that is legit. Oh, that is like for real, man. And he didn't pull rank. He was just like, I'm going to pull the rug out from under you in about 15 minutes. Like, you have no idea what's coming.
Right. And this president CEO guy, he's a Harvard graduate, so he could have just pulled all kind of rank. He didn't. And I sent him a message. He's since passed away. I sent him a message about, 7, 8 years ago on LinkedIn. I hadn't talked to him in a long time. And I said, hey, you may not remember me. I told him my name. He says, yeah, you were there first day when the guy sat next to you and said, he told the whole story right back to me. I kid you not.
He knew
exactly.
Yeah.
So learning early on about how to treat people and how to, make those relationships work for you, because it's going to come a time when you're going to need those. So I worked my way up at that company and I was vice president and I had like national vice president. I was 30, 31 years old. So, I worked my way from marketing finance coordinator up to vice president. But there's a bunch of challenges when you do that, especially you grew up in an organization and you're young. At that point, I was, like I said, at 31, I had people I was working with that were working for me that were 20 years older than me. Right. So, imagine me I'm explaining to you, here's what we need to do. Here's how we're going to move this organization forward. People are like, my kids are older than you. What are you talking about? Right. I would literally got a lot of that type of pushback. throughout that
Yeah,
process.
yeah. Well, you know what? I tell you, as much as we might have, because I had all of that, right? I'm 25 years old, to 30 years old. You walk in the room and they're like, "Who are you?" Right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know about you, but having recently flipped over 50, I wish I had those days back. Like I like that. That was a nowadays people are like, you still work here? I thought you retired. You're like, wait, whoa, whoa,
Yeah,
whoa, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But what is it, that the assumptions that people make? And you could say that's a similar pattern that people might make with an assumption with somebody who's got a physical disability, right? Just because you're physically you have something that's different, you're in a wheelchair, you're missing a limb, something's going on, right? That it's like, the assumptions we make. Well, but it's almost universal that when somebody's younger, we assume that they're basically operating at a deficit. And to a degree, they are a little bit, right? Like, but by the same token, it's like, wait a second, you don't know that person's story. You don't know what's going on. So tell us a little bit more about how were ways that it manifested either directly or subtly that you knew people were judging you based on your age.
Yeah, I mean, I had comments even in meetings, right? You would comment, you talk about things that you want to go over, how to move forward on something. I said, Brenda, I ran into one. I'll never forget. I ran into one guy. We were wrapping up the end of the day. And he was like, "Hey, he was ready. Want to go out to happy hour?" And I was like, "No, I'm going to pass on a happy hour." And he says, "Don't worry about it, Sharp. I've spilt more liquor than you've ever drank before, right? Because I was young." So he was like, he just took a shot, but it was one of those types of things where in jest, he would just, he still and made the invite, but you're going to run into those things. So sometimes you have to come from a different point of view where I'm not going to go and combat you because you're talking about my age. In my case, I always said, let me just stick to the facts of what we need to get done. And I think over time, people say, well, all right, you know what? The kid is kind of factual. He sticks to what we need to get done. He pushes it forward and we're getting things accomplished. And then I think over time, you're still going to be younger than them. But if you're getting things done and you're making a difference, I think that's what people start to see. So you just go out and prove. It's almost like when you're playing sports, right? You get on the team, you get drafted to a team, you're a draft pick or something. And there's some veterans on the team who are saying, well, yeah, you're here to do that. But until you actually, score in the game, I'm not, going to take heed to what you're saying. Then you start scoring. They're like, oh, okay. He does know what he's talking about. So sometimes you just show improvement. I think you lead by example. When you go out there and demonstrate, I think over time, they're like, oh, okay, you start to win people over when it comes to that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the currency that we're talking about here, is credibility, it's respect, it's trust, it's, some blend of all of those things. So Charles, what's a simple thing we can do that makes an environment more conducive for people to really be able to play to their strengths?
Okay. So when you're thinking about what makes you, what lets you know you're a great leader or becoming a good leader as a young person, I remember back when we had a bunch of brown bag lunches and people could sign up for a brown bag lunch. And they would sign up to meet with, one of the vice presidents for lunch. So one day we come to exec team at the company I work for, and they came in and said, here's the sessions for brown bag lunches. To be 50 employees in a session. And they're like, one person said, I have one, person had one. They're like, Charles, you have 5. I said, I have 5. I said, why? Did you give them to me? Why do I have 5 sessions? They're like, we don't know. You have 5. So that meant 250 people signed up their names to have lunch with me. So as I go to the lunch, the first session I go and I say, hey, thank you for joining. And we're talking. And I wasn't buying lunch. You brought your own lunch, right? And I said to people, I said, what made you pick me? There was a bunch of people you could choose from. And everyone, you had to choose from all of the exec team. They said, because you smiled at us, said hello every day, and you remembered our names. That was it. So, okay, I'm on to something with this. Okay, I'm on to something. I wanted something with this. So
no, they didn't realize is you had just had dental surgery, and so your mouth was all jacked up, so it looked like a smile, but they didn't know, right?
Yeah. Literally, yeah. And I was like, hey, every time you see us, you ask us how we're doing. You remember our names. You say hi to stuff that doesn't cost anything. So for anyone coming up, remember that doesn't cost you anything. You say, to be nice to people, say hi to them, smile at them. It doesn't cost you anything, but it makes their day when you do that. So that's when I learned. I was like, oh, wow, okay. This is really making a difference. I had 250 people sign up, 50 people sessions, and my other peers, some had none and some had 1 or 2. And, wow. So I was like blown away. I was blown away with that. So that was just something I wanted to add on.
That's great. Just because one of the distinctions we make on this show, and I know you and I talked about this, Charles, when we were doing the Leadership Academy with you guys, there's a difference between a position and leadership. right? You might have the title of, VP of East Coast sales or whatnot, but, but do you have the leadership, credibility? And I think when you come into it at a young age, the assumption is you don't have the miles, right? Like that guy about the liquor joke. You just don't have the miles, to have the credibility. And you can, and it's not about trying to say, yes, I do. It's like, well, no, but what I have is I have facts. What I have is, a current understanding of the current situation. What I have is goals that we need to meet. And what I have is, skills that I can help us meet them. And so when you demonstrate the things that you do have, right, and you demonstrate results, well, then you start earning that respect, and by modeling the way. And frankly, I'd rather have people follow me because I've earned it than follow me because I have so many strikes on my shoulder. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and absolutely. At a young age, one of the things I always tell people is, especially if you get a job and you're promoted, you're working a job, you got a lot of people who might be, you might be the youngest person there, or you're starting out. The key thing is like, inside, well, if that other person was the right person for the job, they would have been hired. They would have never met you. So the company would never brought you into the mix. So the fact that you're in the mix is that the company believes that you're the right person. So as long as you keep that inside, knowing that you are the right person, you're going to build your confidence, and your success will help you continue to move forward. And as you do that, like I said, it's almost like I use a lot of sports analogies. It's almost like seeing a ball go through the basket. As you start to score, you get more confident that you know what you're doing. You're able to continue to do that. And you start stacking these wins up one after another. And then I think others you work with start to believe in it as well. But I think it's just a matter of like, just stay humble and stay confident as you're moving through that though.
Yeah, but that's easier said than done. I mean, yes, that is the path, but let's look at it from two different lenses. Let's look internally, the person that's in that situation who has those doubts. Talk to us a little bit about what you did to manage those fears or those concerns or that uncertainty. And what other advice you could have for people who are facing that. And then let's flip it around and be like, okay, now if you're in a position where maybe now you're the veteran, you're seeing a young leader in a high level position, what could you do to be supportive of them? So let's look at it kind of from both lenses. So tell us a little bit more, Charles, about the types of doubts and whether they were actually for you or just you've seen them in your career with other folks. What are some of the doubts that sneak into people's minds? Like, tell me more about those.
I think you're afraid to make a mistake, right? Because especially if you're starting out and you're young, I don't want to make a mistake. So you start to worry about making mistakes. And then you also worry, like, if I don't understand something, I don't know anything, I'm afraid to ask someone. So I think it's key. Two things I found that are really key. One in particular is, having mentors with an S, like more than one. So people that you can bounce your ideas off of and ask questions to. It's really important, for you to have that, and then seek feedback. So once something's complete, you go back and ask people, how was that received? How did that go? Because once you get done, sometimes you just move on. But I think if you stop and say, hey, let me ask, because it might have gotten done, but the how might not have been good, right? Because you might have trucked people trying to get there. You thought it went great because you got a attaboy at the end, but everyone that you work with was like, that was terrible because, it didn't feel good to me. So mentors with an S, meaning more than one, is important for, I think, at all levels, but particularly when you're young and you're starting out. And then ask for feedback when it was over. How did I do? How did you receive that? Is there anything I could have done differently? I think it's important that you ask those things and then make adjustments as you go. So almost like if you're midway through something, you make adjustments.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, to me, it's like the distinction between engine time and mileage,
Yeah.
right? This engine has 60 hours on it. This engine has 600 hours on it. Well, when you ask for feedback, what ends up happening is for the 60 hours of engine time you have, the miles that you get and you get feedback, you actually learn a lot more from those, right? So that leader's got a lot more mileage, whereas another one that's got 600 miles of time on it, 600 hours, but it just sat in the barn, right? It didn't go nowhere. And it, like maybe you've moved around some, but if you're not getting feedback on how it went, you're like, well, yeah, it was fine. You're like going, yes, but you didn't get your maximum benefit out of it. You only learned 2% out of what could have been 100% learning. Yeah, you achieved the goal, but maybe you achieved the goal in spite of what you were doing, not because of what you were doing. And surrounding yourself with mentors and asking for feedback is like, somebody with 2 years of experience who's been tapping into mentors and getting feedback, they might have the equivalent mileage of 20 years of experience. But somebody with 20 years experience who just beat their head against the brick wall is like, they might only be worth 2 miles,
Yeah, because you
And
can't do it yourself. Can't do it by yourself. I mean, it's like raising, being raised or raising a kid, right? There's going to be a bunch of people who will be involved in this, right? And especially now when you make it further in your career and now you're the C-suite person or the senior vice president or the vice president. It's your job to now return that favor and pay it forward, right? You need to be talking to your employees and you making sure you're mentoring people and making sure when you say the door is an open door policy, I mean, you can talk to me anytime. Like legitimately, if someone sends you a Teams message, I'm legit responding. Like even though it's the Teams instant message, I tell them if you have a question, just send it to me. They're like, what? Send it to me. I'm like, no, send it. And when I respond, people are like, I didn't think you were going to respond. I'm like, of course, right? Because why would I not, right? So, but that tells you their experience with other people. That lets you know.
yes, yeah, with other folks, they're not getting that. And I think, there's those fears you talked about, those doubts, so one is I'm going to make a mistake. The other one is I'm going to look stupid. Right. And those are related, but they're different. So let's talk about that. I'm going to look stupid. So if I ask somebody, I'm going to look like I don't know what I'm talking about, and my reputation is going to go down. Right. So that's the young person's perspective when they're looking at it. But then Charles, if I ask you, yeah, I'm like, hey Charles, what do you think on this? How might you approach this? Or what do I need to be careful of with this group of people or this product or this client? When I'm asking you for your advice, how do you feel when you get asked for your advice? Does that make you feel bigger, same, or smaller because somebody asked you?
I think it makes you feel like you're a part of the team, right? It makes you feel like you're a part of the decision. So when you're the leader, you should be asking those questions. And I actually had a call before I came on with you today. A guy on my team, I said to him, I said, look, man, I know I'm probably not thinking about this right. I need your help on this. And he was like, let me drop everything. What's going on? I said, look, I'm struggling with this one. What do you think about this? And he's like, oh, we do this, this, and that. And I was like, there it is right there. Done. We're all set. Done. Because you're not going to be the smartest in the room all the time, right? You don't want to be. I don't want
You
to
don't
be,
want to
right?
be. Yeah, that's a problem if you are. So the irony is that the facts are completely opposite. The young person's mind is tempted to think by me asking this question, I'm going to look stupid. When in reality, now, granted, you got to ask a thoughtful question. If you ask a careless, lazy question, you're not going to necessarily look stupid, but you're going to look careless and lazy, right? But if you ask a thoughtful question to say, hey, I might not know about this. Could you fill me in? Or what angle am I missing? Or what should I be considering in this that I might not otherwise be? When you ask a thoughtful question, the person that receives it is going to feel honored and be like, wow. And they're going to think it was smart of you not to go off half cocked and blindfolded into that thing. Cause then you look like a rookie. Then you look like an idiot. Right. So it's like, it's so funny how those two things are completely opposite. And then, but once you've done, now granted, there are people out there who will burn you. You ask a question and they'll use it as a power trip. But again, like those aren't the people you're going to seek mentorship from, right? You're going to navigate around those and move on.
Mm-hmm. A lot of times I tell people when you ask those questions, you ask, that type of stuff, you could just go in and saying, hey, I need some thought partnership on this. Right. And I'm going to tell you why. Here's a couple of things I'm throwing out here. What do you think? And you get their feedback, their input. I think people start to see you as more of a partner too when you're doing those types of things. Right. You want to be that trusted advisor, but you have to earn that. You earn that.
But you mentioned something I think that is key also though, Charles, and that is, it doesn't mean you go in, on step one asking for advice. You do some homework, right? So you go and say, hey, here's what I've looked up. Here's what I've done on my own. Here's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm looking for somebody to bounce this. Like that shows that you did your homework. I guess I could say if somebody just shows up and says, I haven't thought at all about this, but I was hoping you could do all my thinking for me. Then I want to be like, yeah, no, I'm not doing your job for you either, right? So I think the key here is it's not, I do think there is such a thing as a stupid question. People say there's no such thing as stupid, but oh no, trust me, I've heard some really stupid questions. But I think if you go into it, you did some homework, you were respectful, you were thoughtful, and were genuinely asking for their input. That's not a stupid question, right? That's going to be thoughtful every single time.
Yeah. I think when you go through that, right, because then it shows the people you're working with, they understand that you've done the due diligence up front and you thought it through and you're truly seeking their opinion and their input. You're not just saying it just to be saying it. right? And then when you take action on what they've said, and then when you get in other meetings, other situations, you say, hey, I partner with so and so on this and put with that, then I think people are saying, oh, he come and meet with me, but he actually used the input, and then it actually gave me some kudos in the meeting, which is always important for others, right? When you're showing them, it's like that. One thing you mentioned though, it's about, when you're young, you think you can do everything. It's like the earlier you start to let people know that you don't know everything, even especially when you're younger, I think the more receptive people are going to be working with you, especially if you're like the leader and you're young, is you're like, I don't know it all, right? So it's important that you acknowledge that, but there are skills that you have and there's skills that they have, and you guys just work together.
Absolutely. And that, a person that adds value is the one who lifts the value of everybody involved, right? The person who comes in is like, I know it all. I know better than you. And you guys are all a bunch of bumpkins. Like, nobody wants to work with that guy anyways, right? So why would you want to be that guy? You're like, you're going to run out really quickly. I mean, I see this even in our consulting business, Charles. I mean, working with great clients like you guys, we come up and it's like, yeah, there's some things we know about a certain thing, but we don't know your business. Right. And vice versa. So it's like, a great partnership is, you're like, well, hey, Lee, I think these are some competencies we want to work on, with our executives and with our up and comings and our mergings, right? Because we had the 3 levels. And it's like, okay, great. Well, then we put together some models and some, plans and whatnot. And then we did a few iterations, and then we were like, what do we learn from that? How could we do it better? And it wasn't like you're like, man, that guy sucked. He didn't do it perfect the first time. He had to ask me about my business. He should have known all that already. Get him out of here. No, by me saying, hey, we're learning together here, I think it built a stronger relationship, and it was a better experience for our shared customers.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think when you're in those situations, the key thing is that you know that your partners bring a strength to the table that you don't have, right? So the more info you can give them about the company, the better they can apply it to the strengths that they have, and you get the results you're looking for, right? So it's not about, oh, you didn't know this about us. Why didn't you look this up? Well, you know what? You got the source. Let me tell you everything you need to know about us, and then you can do what you do best, right? You don't have to sit and try to figure it all out, right? That never works when you're saying, oh, let me make them figure it out. Why? Why be
Right.
like that? Why even be like that, right?
Yeah. No, it just burns calories. And, it goes back again to the whole model of Pride, employing people with disabilities. It's just like, let's not start with what you can't do. Let's start with what you can do. What strengths do you have? What knowledge do you have? What abilities do you have? And then let's get everybody to play to their strengths, and collectively will have a greater impact as a result of that. So that was one of them. That was the fear of looking stupid. The other one you talked about was the mistakes, and you mentioned it a couple times, but I want to dig a little deeper on that one. So let's you can get some great mentorship, but sometimes mentors give you conflicting advice, right? Sometimes they don't know. Sometimes the battlefield is unfolding faster than you can predict, and so you make a move, and you're like, crap, that was not the right one. Right. And so tell us about how the fear of that can paralyze us, and what are some things that we can do to work through that?
Yeah. The first thing you have to know is that it's going to happen, right? So if you just acknowledge it's going to happen,
It's gonna happen.
you can't avoid it. It's going to happen, right? So I mean, I could think of countless mistakes I made where I was like, okay, I learned from that. But that's the key thing: is you learn from that mistake. Don't make that mistake again. So when you're going through that, if you have, it almost makes you a little more relaxed. You say, well, look, I'm going to make a mistake at some point, and the world's not going to end. I had a person I worked for years ago, and things were really stressed, really high stress, and he was like, hey, let me ask you a question. I said, yeah. He says, how's the family doing? I'm like, what? Yeah, they're doing good. Everybody's good. All right, so let's get back to him. He said, no. I ain't go, name by name. How's your sister? How's, every asking like names. I'm like, yeah, they're doing good. He's all right. This is okay then. This is just work. This is just work. It's gonna happen.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
So he's telling you like what's really important.
You're like,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
like put it in perspective.
That perspective is like, oh, okay. And this building, this company you work for, in some cases been here, 20, 30, 50, 60 years, 80 years before you. It's going to be here after you. So if you make a mistake, the place is not going to crumble. It's not going to fall apart. So that, I think, relaxes you now to make decisions that you're not really operating from a fear mindset. You're operating from, I'm going to get the positive best outcome for the company mindset. So even if you make a mistake, as long as it's going in that direction, I mean, it's going to be okay because it's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, those are two great pieces of advice. So one, it's going to happen. And given that it's going to happen, would you rather it happen sooner when you got more time to do something about it, or do you want it to happen at the last possible second when everything else is locked in? Like, let's accelerate it. Let's make it sooner. And then the second thing is put it in perspective, right? You know, what you think is the end of the world is probably just a minor burp. I mean, I go back to the analogy, when you're talking about planes going long distance, right? Like, that plane's got to get from, Boston to San Francisco or whatever, right? And most of the time that plane is off course. But they're making lots of micro adjustments early on, right? Like they don't wait to leave the tarmac until they've accounted for every little wind stream, over Chicago or whatever. Like you just leave the tarmac, you get after it, and you make adjustments when you're in the air. And guess what? We still land where we're supposed to most of the time, on time. Yeah. So
Yeah, most
yeah,
of the
so
time,
that's
and that's part of it. That's just like business, right? Your day could start. You have everything on your calendar. I'm going to do this, and this today. So we're going to accomplish. Once you get started, it may not go that way, and you just have to be okay with that. Like you can't control every variable, right? You just have to be able to adjust. I always tell people when you talk about leadership and how to be successful with those types of days, I tell people have leadership agility. Be able to do what's needed when it's needed. So you may be working on something where you're going to be in a consulting role, consulting people how to get something done. There might be something else where you might actually be leading and doing the actual work. There might be one where you're doing planning. So it's all in a day's work, really. So just have that agility, that flexibility to kind of be able to know when and how to adapt to those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. No, great advice. And you had a wonderful quote. And I don't know if you remember where it came from, but it was, "You cannot fall off the floor."
You can't fall off the floor. You can't. I literally said that earlier today. I don't know what day this is going to air. I'm a big New York Giants fan, and we let our coach go today. And somebody says, "Oh, well, where do you go from here?" I said, "Well, we can't fall off the floor. So we're at the bottom. So you only can go up from here, right?" So sometimes when you're at that spot, you make a mistake. Understand you fell off the floor. Okay, you didn't get hurt. Like nothing happened to you. Like physically, you're fine. Like your body is fine. You're not. You didn't get sick. There's people with real problems. That's not a real problem. That's something in our mind we've conditioned ourselves to be like, oh my God, I made a mistake at work. I can't sleep. I can't eat. No, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen. I love it. I love it. Well, tell us, there was a story you mentioned about an executive leadership series you attended at University of Chicago. And I want to frame this just a bit, but then I'll turn you loose, man. But, we're talking about the inner work right now, right? So you're a young leader, right? You've got your own self-doubts and limiting beliefs of, going to look stupid or you're going to make a mistake. We've addressed that. All right. So now you've conquered those demons. Let's go back and talk about now the exterior game. Like some of the crap you're going to see and deal with. How do you handle it with grace, and how do you use it to build your credibility? So tell us about that story.
Yeah. So I was at University of Chicago Executive Education Series, right? And I go in. I remember doing the check-in, and you're going over who you are, what your job is, where you work and stuff. And I'm looking at the list of people who are here. And I'm thinking it's like a United States thing, but this is like an international event, right? So I'm seeing people leaders from the World Bank, from different banks to Switzerland, all these other things. I'm like, oh man, you look at all these places. You're like, man, my job is like this compared to their jobs are like that, right? So we're going in there.
So you're kind of sizing up the attendees, right? You're like, yeah, I'm a small fish in this pond.
Listen, so for example, one of the guys in there, I was laughing. I saw his name and I said, "Oh man!" I said, "Oh yeah, I know your name. Your name is your last name is interesting." I said, "Because that's like the same people who make the weights that are the weights like in Olympics." He's like, "No, that's us. I'm the grandson of the company." I was like the people who make those. When you see the power lifters, they make those weights. So these people, like, these pretty big companies, right? So, but I go in, I go in with you register, and I go up and I sit down, and it's like a lecture hall, but the way it's set up is that it peers back, but it's built in a sense where even if you're in the back, they can hear you down and below. You don't know that. So,
so the acoustics, right? Yeah, that's right. The acoustics make it so you can have a dialogue with, 100 some odd people. Yeah.
right. So young lady comes in, she's getting everything in order. She's doing a laptop and stuff. She's getting things in order. And the guys to my left, I hear them talking. And one guy was like, man, he said something along the lines of like, "Oh, I wish if this girl could hurry up and we can get started, right?" Because she was, young lady came in, and he's like, because he's like, "I like to start on time." He's talking all this, smack, and then once everything's up, she hits the button on the laptop and introduces herself. She's like, "How you doing? I'm your leader for your session." And this young lady, so I look over him, and she's like, and for those who are wondering why I'm still here and what I'm doing, she ran it down. Like, I mean, her background was like Yale, University of Chicago, Harvard, and something else. And she had all these degrees of all this stuff. She's here to teach us. And I mean, first of all, she schooled him in the most eloquent way in the very beginning with her intro about her background and everything and why she's here, because he kept saying, "Why is she here?" So she heard everything he was saying, but did it eloquently. But in that session, one of the things I took away from her, and I remember, she says, "There's a reason why your phone rings she said at 5 a.m. or 5 p.m. when you get out of work." And she's like, the thing that makes your phone ring is people want to talk to you. People want to be around you. They want to see you. She says, you need to bring more of that to your day job. So whatever you're doing to make people want to be around you, want to see you, bring it to your day job. She says, it'll help you get things done more at work. And she's the first person I ever heard talk about social capital, which was how you build relationships and how valuable they are at work. And she talked about when you build social capital, regardless of your age, you can get things done at work because you have social capital. It's almost like having money, right? But it's like you're not using money. You're using your social capital to get things done. Just like if you're helping people, you're very nice, you're getting through all this stuff. And then when you need to call on someone, they're like, "Oh, of course, Lee, what do you need? I got you covered. No problem." Because you helped them so many times, and you're helping people because you want to help. You're not helping people to get access to anything. So when it's a time when you make that ask, everyone's going to be there for you because you've been there for everyone. And ever since she pointed that out, I was like, man. And now if you do these things, you'll see people respond to your emails instantly. They respond to your Teams messages instantly. They respond to your invites. That all comes from you building social capital within your organization. And that's how you get stuff done in an organization.
Yeah. But that takes the leader to go beyond the transactional, because if the first time you're talking to somebody is when you need something, you're in the hurt box there. Like, you want to be like, hey, I show up. How do I make myself valuable to others? How am I here to serve? How am I here to contribute? Even if it's not my immediate area of responsibility, right? And that requires, putting yourself out there and looking and being curious and listening to be like, Charles keeps talking about this. That seems to be a challenge for him. I've got a thing, or I know a person who has a thing. Doesn't even have to be you, right? That can maybe help Charles out. Well, let me make sure I make that introduction. Or, hey, Charles, would you like a little assistance on that? And, so you've got to, you're putting those relationship investments in there, to show, look, I'm here for us. And then you're like, man, Charles, I am stuck. I could use your help, right? Well, now Charles has got, okay, yeah, I know you've got my back, so I'm more willing to have yours. And that law of reciprocity, I think, gets washed out by folks just being transactional. Well, I need this today, and my need is really important, so you should just give it to me. And if you don't, I'm going to get somebody with more stripes on their shoulder to make you give it to me. It's like, yeah, you can do that. That's just going to be expensive.
Yeah. And that becomes the poor experience, right? The customer experience in that is very poor. And the how, that's when you do the feedback, you ask, how did it go? They're going to say, it didn't go as good as you thought it did.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. You got it done, but you burned some social capital versus earning that social capital.
But it was really important. That was a big thing for me, learning that and then teaching my team that, as well, right? As a leader, if you have to pass on those nuggets that you get, and if you pass them on to people, and I've taught people how to go about doing that, really, it's really of a matter. And something you said in there triggered something to me when you say helping people with something they having trouble with, even in your team meetings. If you hear, one of your team members saying they're, trying to find, Taekwondo or karate for their kids, and your kid already goes, mention it to them. Hey, I've had a good experience at this place. Or if they're into music, those types of things is where you build those connections for people. And then you're like, oh, hey, this went really well. My son now goes to piano lessons at the same place you mentioned. So now you got a connection with that person. So one day they may need something from you, or you need something from them, but they'll be an ally and be able to help you get things done.
There you go. Yeah. And again, I think there's lots of reasons people can be afraid to do that. But it's just like, look, if you don't try, you're not going to get the benefit of it. So you got to be willing to put yourself out there a little bit. And yeah, some people are like, I don't care where your kid got karate from. It's none of your business. Like, okay, right. And then what? I didn't lose anything there. I found out that guy's a jerk.
Right.
And
Right. And it doesn't hurt to find that out, right? It doesn't hurt. It doesn't cost you anything.
better to know now than later, right? Same thing. So again, I didn't lose any. I so often people tell me, as I go, oh, I lost, or I lose, or I'm going to lose, or I'm going to, and I'm like, unless somebody is literally deducting something from your bank account or taking some property out of your house, you didn't lose, you gained. You gained knowledge, you gained wisdom, you gained experience, right? And so it's like, yeah, now if they, fraudulent transaction, yeah, then you lost.
Right. Right. And
Um,
without that, you didn't though.
you didn't. It could only be a gain. This has been really great, Charles. So let's flip it one more turn of the screw there and look at it to say, okay, you were that young leader back then, so you can have some appreciation for it. Now you're trying to support somebody that's in that role. And you don't want to be like those guys in that lecture hall where you're talking smack. You don't want to be like the guy saying, hey, AV guy, right? So we clearly don't, I think one of the lessons of this is people are always listening. So be careful what you say. Um, but what's a tip or a piece of advice for somebody to help a person in that early leadership role really thrive and succeed?
I think the key to me is in leadership is storytelling, right? You want someone to get a message or understand something. It's not always going to be, let me tell you how to do this. That won't always work. So sometimes let me tell you what happened with me. And then from there, they can take from that and say, I remember this great story about why people succeed or don't succeed. So a person told me, it was a CEO at a place I worked, mentioned about people, why people fail climbing Mount Everest. And he's like, I know you're thinking because it's cold. You're thinking because it's the equipment. You're thinking they get tired. And he's like, all those things do happen. But one of the key reasons people never succeed or don't succeed climbing Mount Everest is because they're always looking up at Mount Everest. They never or rarely are stopping to look down and say, man, look how far we came. Man, we only have that distance to go. I can't even see how far we come. So it's really telling people how to celebrate wins as they happen, because we'll spend so much time focusing on something that went wrong and we'll glaze over something that went great. I mean, literally, even when we're talking about in our personal lives with our kids, if your kid gets one C and a bunch of A's and B's, first thing people always say, why'd you get a C? Right? They never say, tell me about that A you got. You got 2, 3 A's. How'd you get those A's? So we always tend to focus on. So same thing when you're trying to do something in leadership, right? Take that time to celebrate those wins. Take that time to thank someone when something's going right. Don't always jump to make a comment when something's going wrong. And then I would say, like, when something does go wrong, don't comment right then and there. Take a little time to process, because their point of view, you may not have taken that into account before you say what you're going to say. And as the leader, what you say to people is going to be really important. It's going to be really important. So if you come in hot saying something and you don't have all the facts, so sometimes just take a little time there before responding.
Yeah, no, great tips there. I mean, I heard, make sure you focus on the progress, at least as much, if not even more than the deficits, right? But what still has to be done, well, let's take a moment, acknowledge what has, because that puts fuel back in the tank, right? That reminds people that, yes, we can. Yes, we are making progress. Yes, we had resilience. Yes, we were able to overcome adversities, and so now that makes what's left to go, it's putting in perspective. And then the other one I heard there, Charles, was, just being mindful when you do need to provide a constructive criticism, which is part of the job. Like, that's what we got to do. Just give a moment to listen. Maybe don't jump right on the C. Take a moment to acknowledge the A's. And I found that when I've done that, sometimes they jump to the C all by themselves, right? They're like, yeah, no, you're right. But we didn't do that on this one. And that's why that's the way it is. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, thanks for pointing that out to me. I appreciate your integrity. Way to have great stuff. So now you're celebrating their accountability, their transparency, their integrity. And you're like, wait, aren't I going to get a beating here? And you're like, oh, that's coming. Don't worry. But right now, I'm acknowledging that you're already taking care of it, and that's part of it. And I think signaling that helps people be able to, again, go back to address that fear of mistakes or the fear of looking stupid. And it was just like, yeah, well, you already saw it though, so I don't need to say it, right? Go out and sin no more.
Yeah, and that's so important, Lee. It's so important. No, good. I was just saying that's so important.
Yeah, right. And that's something I think somehow we as leaders feel like if I don't say it, they don't see it. And I think as leaders, really it's helping them to see for themselves. If they're just trusting on your eyes and all they are is a pair of hands, you're not leading, right? You might be managing, but you sure as heck aren't leading. But when they can see for themselves and learn for themselves, right? Now you've got double loop learning. Now you've unleashed them. Now they can grow. Now they can get the most mileage gained and not just have engine hours gained. So right on. Well, Charles, listen, where can folks find out more about you, stay in touch with what you're up to as you continue to have an awesome impact on our communities?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. I don't have any other social media really. So on LinkedIn, it's a C Sharp 203 on LinkedIn. So CSHARP 203 on LinkedIn. I'm sorry guys, I don't do any of the other.
No, it's just, look, it's all good, but
And I'll tell people. Let me tell you something real quick though. People, when I talk to younger people, right, and about their careers and stuff, that's one of the things I'll ask. I say, hey, let me ask you a question. How many friends or followers you have on Facebook and Instagram? They'll show me. They'll say, oh, I got 5,000, 10,000, big numbers. And I say, oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And they're talking to me about jobs usually, like, oh, I want to make a job, I want to make more money, I want to do these things. And then I ask them, how much money have you made off that? And they're like, what are you talking about? I go, oh, like, how many people you have on LinkedIn? They're like, oh, I got 50 people on LinkedIn. I said, well, I made my money off LinkedIn. I've made any money off any other places. So I'm not saying it doesn't work, but I'm just saying you have, like they say, you have to meet people where they are. So if a young person is trying to get to a certain place, a lot of times the people who are in those places are, they're like our age, right? We may not be where you are, but if you're trying to get to where we are, you might want to come over here too. I'm not saying don't do the other ones, but be just as effective at LinkedIn as you are with the other ones. That's all I'm saying. So
yeah, definitely. Well, be willing to put yourself in proximity, right? If you want to, was mentoring a young real estate lady the other day, and it's like she's like, hey, I want to have these types of clients. I want to have these types of buyers and sellers, and it's like, well, where are they, and how can you be in proximity to them? Right. And it was a simple known thing. I mean, it's like, no duh. But it really kind of opened her eyes to be able to be like, yeah, I guess I am. I'm hanging out with this crowd. Right. And that crowd ain't my ideal buyer or seller. Right. But that crowd is. And it's like, oh, well, then that's where I'd be hanging out.
yeah. I mean, it's about having that. And then one thing I wanted to say about Pride really quick before we go. So prideindustries.com is the website. I'll tell people, we were at an award ceremony last year and Pride won an award, and I spoke to the crowd and I said, I want to say the same thing I'll say here. As you're making your hiring decisions, understand that a person with a disability can do any job that anyone can do. The one thing most people stumble over is like they say, well, I don't know how to manage that person. And if you reach out to Pride Industries, we can handle that. We offer job coaches, which you do not pay for. Pride Industries pays for the job coach to help manage the person who is on the site. So any jobs you're thinking about doing, and I run them down from custodial, landscaping, facilities maintenance, kitting and fulfillment,
inventory,
any of that type of work.
You guys even have like high-end manufacturing that's going on, man. It's like
medical devices, all that stuff. We do all of it. So prideindustries.com, that's our website.
Yeah, definitely check that out, folks. Well, Charles, thank you so much for sharing with our listeners out there that are all different levels in their career. They might be that early one. They might be an old dog trying to help an early one. But I think you're right. It's like, helping each of us climb that ladder. We all have blind spots. We all have limitations, but we also all have something to contribute. And I think that is a great message of hope and empowerment that you're sharing. And you live it every single day, brother.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Lee. It was awesome to get a chance to talk to you today.
Thank you for joining us today on the Unleashing Leaders podcast. Subscribe so you don't miss a moment that could be the key to your next breakthrough. Let's stay connected and contribute together by grabbing that @Unleashing Leaders handle on LinkedIn, YouTube, or your favorite network. This is Lee Scott. Keep learning, loving, and leading. Our future and our communities are counting on us.